So one of the interesting things that happened during the granular panels is that every week I would ask people, what is your Peter Thiel paradox, which is you put forward an idea that on its face, almost no one would agree with you. But by the time you explain it, people say, actually, that's a really interesting idea. And the reason it's so difficult is that if you come out of the gate with your Peter Thiel paradox and people already agree with you, then you've failed. But then if you say something that nobody agrees with, now you've got to explain it. You had one that I think was really interesting, and you've maybe thought of some since then. But what is your Peter Thiel paradox that you brought up during the granular panel?
Was it? Can you give me a hint?
Oh, it was about the farmers being employed by the government.
Absolutely. So whether they chose it or not, the government has very much become involved in their business. And since we've done that granular interview, Vance, the government, as of a few days ago, thanks to some wonderful people we're involved with, and I'm not saying that sarcastically, the United States government issued another $14 billion with a B dollars to the American farmer. And so when I think of the American farmer, I think of someone who's strong, educated, fiercely independent, has an opinion and will fight you over it. And here they are taking massive amount of money from the United States government. And if I was a farmer, I'd cash the check too. I'm not encouraging anyone to send it back. That's what the president does. He says, this quarter I'm sending my money to the Navy. This quarter I'm sending my money here. Don't do that. Take the money. But the United States government has gotten very involved in agriculture. And I would say that they're so involved that when we look back several years from now, we've always known that the United States government will pay us to overproduce. And that's a long history and could be a whole different podcast on why we are where we are. But I think farmers actually think they're out here to farm and raise crops and make money. I'm like, the United States government is paying you to overproduce crops to provide food security and produce high quality food, fuel, and fiber. And they want you to produce so much that when you produce too much, they'll pay you extra just so you don't lose money. And a large majority of agriculture right now, their profit, if there is such a thing in profit right now in agriculture, and there is for many, is coming from the subsidies from the United States government.
So the other day I saw a tweet, and I saw Jared McDaniel retweet it, and I'd be very, very interested in hearing your thoughts on this. Might be a little bit controversial, but it was basically, so the farmers are selling huge amounts of commodities to the Chinese, but at prices that are not high enough to be profitable. So we have to subsidize farmers, which means we are in effect subsidizing food going to the Chinese people. What do you think of that perspective?
That's true. It's not a new concept. I don't think Jared reinvented the wheel. This goes back to Dr. Earl Butz. Do you know who Dr. Earl Butz is, Vance?
The name is familiar, but no, I don't know him.
Okay. Dr. Earl Butz was ag secretary under Richard Nixon and a few other people. And Dr. Earl Butz set a standard, and he said, we're going to change the way agriculture is working. And back then, the United States government was actually paying you not to plant. And Dr. Earl Butz said one quote that's very famous. He said, we want the American farmer to plant fence post to fence post and give America its single greatest advantage, which is to have the most affordable, high quality food in the world. And with that will leave America other money to use with discretionary items like large TVs and maybe a Yeti microphone and a Zoom light. Who knows? But when I look at what I spend in life, food's barely on my radar. It's not. There's so many other things that cost a lot of money than food. And when you look at the rest of the world, he wasn't talking about America. He was talking about America against the rest of the world. Kind of like how I would think China looks at things. China would have a 50, 100-year plan, and they say it's us against the world, and we plan on winning. And some would say they actually are. So all Jared did was requote something that happened about 40 years ago.
Yeah, that was actually put out there by a guy, Mr. Obvious 4. So I don't want to take anything away from Mr. Obvious 4 that had put that out there. But It's an interesting thing that you bring up about our food policy, because if you look at the way the Europeans did it, people think that the European resistance to GMOs is ideological, but I think you can make a pretty strong case that this is the way that they subsidize their farmers. By not having GMOs, they were less efficient. Each farmer produced less, meaning that then they needed more farmers to be producing the goods that they had. So as opposed to giving them cash in order to be able to do some of the innovations that they're doing or to produce at the level, they went the opposite direction. And if you go to Europe, their food is more expensive than it is in the U.S.
Sure. And also when you get off the airplane and you go into the first pub or restaurant, you got to cut through about a 10-foot ceiling of smoke. So here we only eat non-GMO, and they're smoking like it's 1920. I mean, there's all types of crazy, and they got their own special type over there.
So as you look out in the world and you see an election coming up, as a trader, as a broker, how do you think about what everybody anticipates is to be extreme volatility? And I know you make money during volatility, but
I have the opportunity to make money.
That's true.
I have the opportunity to make money. I don't need anyone calling me, telling me they want to send me money, because I'm willing to risk my own, but none beyond that.
So what does it look like in an election year like the one that we're in for, what seems like almost inevitable volatility?
Well, it was interesting. A few months ago, I had watched the documentary about Ruth Ginsburg, and I found it fascinating. And then I watched, there's one that was about the real gal, and then there was one that was a movie. And I liked them both. And I have two daughters, and I had them watch them, and I had my wife watch them. So I've watched these movies a few times, and I actually learned a lot about Ruth and her family and her beliefs and how one woman can change the world. And so here we're coming into election, and at 4:00 last Friday, they announced that she had passed away with 47 days coming in the election. When we look back at history, that might be one of the most interesting things that happened. And there's a lot of moving parts right now. And there's a lot of people who are angry and confused, and they don't quite know why they're angry or confused, and maybe they're going to blame the president. But I often tell people when they're mad at something, I just ask them if they have a washroom in their house, and if they could just go in there and look in the mirror, and that'd probably be the person they're mad at the most, is themselves, for what they didn't do, or the courage they didn't have to move forward, or the bad idea they made. Everyone's looking for a scapegoat. And with social media, as everyone becomes a keyboard activist, it's really easy to say, I have a bunch of sarcasm. But then when you look back, Vance, there's no solutions. And so my opinion, Tom Grisafi's opinion, is I have one vote. But I also have another vote that I figured out recently, Vance. And what other vote? I'm going to start interviewing you and ask you a question. What other votes do we have as American consumers that don't just happen every 4 years or every 2 years?
Well, you have definitely two that I can think of right off the top, which is the way you spend your money and then the way you spend your attention. And those
Bingo.
two things are the way that
I vote every day with my wallet. It's not the world's biggest wallet. If I stood on it, I wouldn't be that much taller. But I do have disposable income, and so does my wife, and so do my kids. So do my parents. And if I'm going to a local establishment and they have an opinion that's so different than mine, I guarantee you I won't go there. It's okay to have your opinion. It just doesn't mean I have to patronize you and your business. And I have friends of all types. I've met so many interesting people at the Chicago Board of Trade. I love to travel. When I was younger, I mentioned earlier, my wife Gina was a flight attendant. She took me to Hong Kong. I've been to Germany. I've been a few places. I leave my basement once in a while. But everyone has one vote. But we get to vote every day with our wallet. And then you mentioned another one.
Yeah, your attention is people are always talking about, I hate what the news has to say, and it's all toxic. And as the moment you stop watching, the moment they stop being able to monetize your attention, which is what's going on. Like, I think there's a lot deeper belief that the ideological opinions of these different channels are anything other than they figured out how to get the largest swath of attention for the lowest amount of effort. And partisanship is a great way to do it. I'm on red team, I'm on blue team, and you get people to focus on just those two things. Then you start making it so that's all they pay attention to. They don't even realize that the world is far more colorful than that. But as long as they keep you focused on those two things, then they get to keep selling your attention to advertisers. And so probably a vote that is just as big as where you spend your money is where you spend your attention.
Sure. So
thanks for checking out this podcast short. If you like this interview, make sure you hit the like and subscribe button and hit that bell so you always get notified about this podcast. And if you're really interested in conversations like this, you may want to consider joining the Articulate Ventures Network. To find out more, go to network.articulate.ventures.